Hello, everyone. Before you get all scared, this is the right channel. You've come to the right channel. This is Gigi's Amazon Interview Wiz at Day One Careers YouTube channel. And my name is Evgeny. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Gigi and I have merged our businesses together under the Day One Careers brand. So today, I'm going to start Gigi's normal YouTube live questions and answers about everything that has to do with Amazon Interview. So don't go anywhere. I'm going to kick this off, and as soon as Gigi is back, she's just running a little bit late. She's going to join us, and you're going to get 2 Amazon experts for the price of 1. How great is that? So before we begin, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Evgeny, as I've already mentioned. Similarly to Gigi, I used to be a senior leader at Amazon. In fact, I was, so my first role at Amazon was a head of marketing for Amazon Launchpad, which is a super exciting project at Amazon, whose main idea and the objective is to bring more startups and get startups to sell more products on Amazon before they become all big massive companies. In my second role at Amazon, I was the head of accessories category within Amazon Devices. And Amazon Devices is the same group and the same organization that brought to us our Echoes, our Kindles, our Fire tablets, and other products. So today I'm going to be kicking off Amazon Interview Q&A. Welcome, everyone. Please drop your questions into the comments, and yeah, we're just going to get started. Now, let me first get that ticker going, folks. I'm doing this for the first time, so bear with me. And boom, there we go. That's the ticker. All right. So let's just say hello. So we've got Positive Space here with us. Hello, Positive Space. And we've got the first question. So let me just start showing them. So hi, Gigi. I'm not Gigi, but I'm going to definitely pass this on to her. I love your videos. Excited to see what happens with your new collaboration with Day One. Amazing. So here you go. That's the collaboration going live. Very excited so far. And hopefully Gigi will let you know as soon as she joins. You have your first ever loop tomorrow for an L7 senior manager role. Congratulations, great stuff. But you have not received your schedule even after reaching out to the coordinator. Is that normal? Should you be concerned? This is highly unusual, I would say. Just normally, your recruitment coordinator will email you the schedule a few days in advance so that you will know who exactly you're interviewing with, and oftentimes their titles, their credentials. So this is indeed a little bit unusual. I don't want to sound patronizing, but have you checked your spam folder? Because sometimes these things do land in there. If you have and you still haven't got anything, I would follow up again. And if they don't send it to you, I would say that just keep following up until you get it. Should you be concerned? To be honest, it's hard to tell what's happening on the Amazon side. It's an organization that is in a state of flux. In most cases, what tends to happen is diaries have conflicts, especially if you're interviewing for an L7 role. They would have to square quite a few diaries of very senior people to get this interview loop going. But that being said, it's absolutely not the reason not to send you your schedule as a candidate. So please do follow up. But if you do have your interview date and if you do have your links, at least if you can attend your interview, I would still obviously attend the interview and get it through. But if you don't, I would follow up via email. If you can also locate your recruitment coordinator on LinkedIn and also follow up with them on LinkedIn if you can, and just get them to respond with a definite response of what's happening. So that's what I would be doing. But yes, it is, unfortunately, it's a little bit unusual, I would say. Dylan is congratulating us for being here. That's great. Thank you so much, Dylan. But let's go on to Benjamin. So Benjamin, welcome. You've got your loop in 1 week for senior account manager role. It is an L5 role, okay? And you are coming from the brand experiential marketing background. How best can you relate to this position? Well, I would say, here's what I would say, Benjamin. Relating to this position from the standpoint of having a specific background and pitching yourself functionally as someone whose past experience has prepared them to excel in the role that you're interviewing for is something that you would need to be doing at the stage when Amazon is trying to establish your functional fit to the role. And that is typically done before your loop. I'm saying typically because obviously there are humans on the other side interviewing you. And so technically speaking, nothing is stopping them from throwing a functional competency question your way. But I would say in 9 cases out of 10, you have already established the relevance of your functional skill set that you have acquired during your previous roles, in this case, the experiential marketing background, to the role that you are interviewing for. So if they have progressed you to the loop, what it basically means is that they're satisfied that functionally you've got what it takes. And so right now, your job is to focus on indeed the leadership principles, to make sure that you raise the bar on those leadership principles and demonstrate the right seniority signals through the scope of your projects and the complexity of your projects, the impact that you've produced on the organizations that you worked for before, through the seniority of stakeholders that you've dealt with, and through the internal scope of your role. So that would be our guidance. Let's keep going. So we've got Dylan. So this channel offers amazing tips. That's great. I'm going to pass it on to Gigi. She'll be flattered. What do we recommend for somebody coming from the restaurant industry? So you're interviewing, sounds like you're interviewing for sales, AWS entry-level role. You have their attention. So I'm not entirely sure what you mean by you have their attention, as in, have you been invited to an interview? Do you have your phone interview? Do you have your loop ready? Interestingly enough, as someone who used to work in the restaurant industry, so Yum Brands over here, marketing, KFC, love the bit of fried chicken before I switched into tech. I'm just going to have to assume that in terms of having their attention, that perhaps they've invited you for the phone interview. As with all phone interviews, your one of the jobs that you have in there is to establish that your skill set is relevant to the role. That's something that they would normally do during your phone interview. It's something that they will do by looking at your CV first, but they've invited you to the phone interview. They may want to establish or ascertain your functional fit. And normally they would do this for non-technical roles through something like tell me about yourself question. And so what you do to answer the tell me about yourself question is effectively you sift through the job description in granular detail. And then what you try to do is construct a 2-minute pitch that effectively sums up your accomplishments and skills from previous roles and translates it in a way that is essentially it's relevant to what they're looking for. And so when your interviewer asks you, tell me about yourself, you've got this ready. You know how to pitch your skills that you have acquired, your skills and accomplishments that you have acquired in the previous role to the role that you're interviewing for. How exactly to do this from a restaurant industry to the AWS role in sales, I wouldn't be able to tell you because obviously I haven't seen your CV. I didn't walk your life in your shoes, but I hope the overall guidance is helpful. Let's keep going. So I'm going to skip through some questions that I don't think I'll be able to answer very quickly. I'm just going to acknowledge them. So here's a question around, could you give more details around senior manager tech, people leader interview, coding test, and system design test? Unfortunately, no. So coding and system design is not our forte, although in case you do need to brush up on a system design specific questions, we do have a course that we recommend. We don't we're not the authors of this course, but a lot of our candidates who do need to pass through system design interviews were swearing by it. So if you'd like us to send you a link, please add a comment to this video, and then we will respond with a link to the course that we recommend based on the experience of other clients that we worked with. So let's keep going. Here's a question from Tao. Welcome. So it sounds like you received an email after providing the availability for the loop saying that they're working on it. That's great. They should keep working on it and probably get it to a resolution. And now 7 days passed and you haven't received an update. Is this normal? I would say this is not ideal, but it's not the end of the day, because again, depending on the functional role and the level that you're interviewing for, they may have to square a lot of different diaries. I would say keep on following up. I think if you follow up every 3 days, thereabouts, it's absolutely fine. They do owe you a schedule, so do feel free to follow up, and you'll get it at some point in time. But if they did say to you that they are inviting you to the loop, they will invite you to the loop. So just keep following up, and you'll get your schedule at some point. And then we're coming back to the positive space. Yes, you checked my spam, nothing there. You'll try reaching out on LinkedIn. Yes, please do. As I mentioned, highly unusual situation, but do reach out to them on LinkedIn. Right, so we got Talon here. Hey, Talon. So you've got your phone interview for a senior TPM role today, and you feel underprepared or blanking out on stuff. Oh no, sorry to hear that. What should you do? Reschedule, go with the flow? Amazon reached out to me. You didn't apply. So if you are having your interview today, I would say, unless you are feeling massively underprepared and you actually physically not feeling well, I would say, then I would say just go with the interview, because it is a little bit too late. I would say if it was a couple of days before, and then I would say, yes, go ahead and reschedule it. So my guidance would be to go ahead with the interview. That being said, if you are, for example, physically, let's just say, something happens and God forbid you are not feeling physically ready for the interview. In this case, do feel free to reach out to Amazon and just advise them that you're you've got some sort of physical or medical issue, and ask them to reschedule. They will reschedule your interview. That's for sure. However, if they do reschedule your interview, you will run the risk of them interviewing someone before they interview you. And if that person interviews well and the loop is inclined to hire that person, they will make an offer to that person. If that happens, if they do make an offer to that person, they will still interview you, so you will still have your loop. But even if you get an inclined vote during that loop, if everyone's happy to hire you, but they've made an offer to someone else, they won't have a job physically to make you an offer to. So what will happen then is that if you're successful, they will effectively put you on the bench. And so your recruiter will start looking for a role for you. And then if they do find a suitable role for you, then you're not going to have to go through the whole loop. You're just going to have a shortened loop. So see how you feel. Just challenge yourself with regards to kind of your physical readiness. If you're stressed and anxious, my recommendation would be, yes, to push it out. But if you think you can muster through, then do so. But again, keep in mind as to the risk that you're running with getting an inclined loop but not getting an offer. That is a possibility. Let's keep going. So we have an interview for, so Rani, hello. You've got an interview for customer service virtual. Any tips, please? I don't have enough input here, unfortunately, Rani, to give you any tips. I would say start by going to our website, day1.careers, and go to the webpage of Amazon Interview Wiz course and do a free course. So start your preparation by just getting some free resources from us. Watch through DG's YouTube channel. That will give you a lot of prep. And if you get the free course, which you will find on our website, you will also get access to our community, and you'll be able to find interview partners, and you can start preparing with them. And we also obviously have amazing paid resources that we recommend that you check out. But there's a lot of free content there as well on both our blog, our YouTube channel, and within the free community. Right. Coming on to Karam. So this question is, I sent my availability for final panel interview after interviewing recruiter and hiring manager for L6 ops manager position, 4 times 45 minutes. Yep. Do I have to study all LPs, and how many stories? So in terms of stories, you want to aim for 2 stories per LP. In terms of how many LPs, so the best thing to do is first to get in touch with your recruiter and ask them to share what the critical LPs are for this role. Every recruiter will know what the hiring manager believes to be the critical LPs for every role. And from our experience, in 50% of cases out of 100, the recruiters will volunteer those leadership principles. If they do, that will focus your preparation. If that doesn't work, then our recommendation would be to study the to study the job description in detail, and try to tease out the signals or the various different terms that refer to the leadership principles. And once you do that, you should have a list of leadership principles that are essentially encoded in the job description, and that will focus your preparation. So these are the 2 shortcuts that we typically recommend candidates to try and do. But let's keep going. So Alex, welcome. Is the loop an interview with a panel of 4 to 5 people at once, or are they individual interviews broken up into segments? So these would be individual interviews, and you're going to have 1 interview at a time. Every interview typically focuses on 2 leadership principles. Loops can run during the same day when you have 4 or 5 interviews back to back, or they can split them into 2 days. Whether to have them back to back or split them is entirely up to you. It depends on what you might be comfortable with. Some candidates prefer to have everything in the same day so that they don't have to think about it, and some candidates prefer to have it split. The benefit of having a split loop is that you can go through the content that you've already presented during your first day and take it off so that you don't have to use that content during the second day of the loop. Moving on, so there's a question from Kenneth. You've got a loop on Friday for a senior PM position, and you were given a time slot. Will you get the names of each person on the panel like I did for the 2 phone screens? Usually you do. That's tends to be the typical practice. If they haven't sent them to you, feel free to reach out to your recruiter and ask them to send you the names of your interviewers and possibly their titles and LinkedIn profiles. It's totally fair game to look them up. Let's keep going. Should you write an email to thank the recruiter who got you an offer after you join? Well, I like this question. Do what feels right to you. So, I mean, it's on you, right? You've done well, right? They got you an offer. That's entirely down to your performance and your career. The recruiter, if you think the recruiter has done a great job looking after you and helping you schedule and arrange your interviews, then yes, for sure. Do write a thank you email to them. That's what I would do, but it doesn't influence absolutely anything. It's just something it's just a nice thing to do. So I would say yes, by all means do that. Well, let's keep going. So back from Dylan, so the recruiter will reach out to him. When talking to the recruiter on the phone, do you also have to speak within the STAR method plus LPs? Well, it depends on what they ask you. If they start, if they throw a leadership principles question at you, which you will know what they do. It's a question that starts, tell me about a time when you took an unpopular stance with your manager or colleagues. You know that they're asking you for a story, in which case you switch to STAR. But if you're just asking you questions that don't require a story, then there's no need to go into a storytelling mode. The only exception would be if they are asking you a functional question. For example, I don't know, if you're interviewing for a marketing role and they're asking you, so how would you price a product? And say if you've had an exercise in the past that you can remember where you actually priced a product, then you can switch to a story mode and say, actually, I can't answer this question, but actually I have a, would you like me to demonstrate? I can think of a specific example from my past experience that demonstrates how I've done this before. And you can volunteer to tell a story. And if the recruiter says, yeah, sure, go ahead, then you can demonstrate with a story. But other than that, there's no need to storytell unless they're asking you specifically a leadership principle question. Let's keep going. So we've got Roger. Hello. For the loop, is it normal to have 2 Amazonians in one of the interviews and the rest are just the candidate and one other Amazonian? So it varies. When you have 2 Amazonians in the same interview, the first one is part of the loop, is the one who is actually doing the interviewing, taking notes, and then is going to be entering all the comments in the interview system. The other one is what Amazonians call a shadow, which is essentially an interviewer in training. All of us had to shadow other interviewers before we were given the license, the internal license to go and interview candidates. And that essentially is what the other Amazonian is doing. So our guidance is just ignore the other person as much as you can. They all need to train interviewers. And if you get into Amazon at some point in time, you will find yourself being that shadow. So don't worry about it and just proceed as normal. Back from Talon. Okay, so this is just a comment. All right, Talon, good luck. Good luck. Go with the flow. All right, we've got VJ here. And the question is, I have a job description. And can we find more obvious LPs based in the description? Well, yes, you can. Again, the real answer to this question is, well, it depends how well the hiring manager and his supporting and the team that supports the this particular recruiting process has written the job description. I would say typically you can scan through the job description and you can find signals, little elements of leadership principles being encoded in the job description. So in most cases, the answer is yes, you can. Question from Daniel. For those of us with only a few years out of school and not a lot of professional experience, how do we prepare stories for all LPs? Good question, and probably relevant to everyone who is a fresh graduate. So essentially, our guidance is to use both professional experience and, if you have to go back into your university experience, use extracurricular activities as much as possible. And the reason why we're saying extracurricular activities is because typically in a university setting, in an academic scenario, I'm sure you can relate to that, a lot of the performance is done solo. So it's effectively you versus yourself. And there are some contexts when I guess they come very close to demonstrating leadership principles. For example, learn and be curious if you needed to learn something. However, because a lot of the academic learning is actually prescribed, it's very difficult to demonstrate Amazonian leadership principles in solo academic work. So our recommendation is use your professional experience as much as possible. If you're genuinely running out of material, then lean into your extracurricular projects where you were interacting with groups of people, leading groups of people, and had to deliver something where the blast radius of your contributions is bigger than just yourself. So hopefully that's kind of these broad guidelines are somewhat helpful. But let's keep going. So, okay, here we go. Roger, welcome. Does it mean anything if the job has been reposted in the time frame that you've been in an interview cycle, or does it just auto post until the role has been filled? There are multiple scenarios that are happening there in the back end. So if I were you, I would completely disregard what's happening with role being reposted. One of those scenarios is an automatic reposting of the role. Oftentimes, what happens is if they want to refresh the role internally, they also have to repost it externally, and they would want to refresh the role internally so that they can get a fresh lot of internal applications from folks who are looking for these jobs internally. But because they have to open post these roles, sometimes they have to open post roles both internally and externally at the same time, it gets also refreshed externally. So don't pay attention to it at all. And as we always say, just focus on the stuff that you can control. You can't control what's happening with their systems and roles. Just control your own prep, but don't worry about it. Right, let's keep going. Luca, do we have any tips or good advice for Pathway Operations Program panel? Any questions? What kind of data and information they need? Numerical only. Thank you. So personally, I am not an expert on the Pathways Operations recruitment program. I would say their leadership principles questions will be very similar to what you would get anywhere else. And so the behavioral interview preparation that we're offering through our both paid and free resources will work. But in terms of the technical questions for the Ops Pathways program, unfortunately, we are unable to advise it. This is not our expertise. Next one from Benjamin. Any recommendations for recommendations from the Amazon recruiter were not to repeat a story more than once. Does this also apply to the about yourself elevator pitch and with each interviewing the loop? Right. So first of all, when it comes to repeating your stories, the recommendation is definitely sound, but I would say that our caveat, so the day one careers caveat here would be that don't repeat exactly the same story more than once, definitely. But I'm sure you can relate, as many of us, you can relate to the fact that a lot of the professional contexts and examples that you have had in your career, you probably can see yourself demonstrating more than one leadership principle. And so you could probably see some career examples where you can sell your experience, or you can spin your experience under various different frames, right? One of them could be fitting a customer obsession example, and another one could be fitting, for example, invent and simplify example. In either of these scenarios, it's fine to do. So mentioning the same context is fine to do, but the story needs to be different. It needs to be selling a different set of behaviors. So that would be the only caveat that I would say. But if in terms of exactly the same story and exactly the same script, yes, for sure, do not repeat it more than once. This does not apply or should not apply to the elevator pitch about yourself. Yeah, it would be highly counterproductive for you to construct 4 or 5 different elevator pitches. So no, you can stick to the same pitch, and it's absolutely fine. As an interviewer, I wouldn't expect you to invent a different elevator pitch about why you want to work for Amazon just for me. How do you deal with the nerves before the interview? So I tell you how I deal with the nerves before the interview, and I can tell you how some of other candidates that I have actually interviewed and then coach dealt with interview with the nerves, as you mentioned. So my best recommendation for dealing with the nerves is to get a really good night's sleep the day before. So do not cram any interview practice 1 or 2 days before your interview. It's counterproductive and it will stress you out. It's counterproductive, by the way, because as you would imagine, to be able to prepare yourself for leadership principles interviews or any behavioral interview, you will have to rehearse and memorize quite a lot of content, even though you're going to have all of it in front of you in some sort of spreadsheet, as we recommend in our courses. But a lot of it will be sort of uploaded into your short-term memory because you would be practicing. The only way to upload anything into your short-term memory, i.e. your star responses to leadership principle questions, is to practice, rehearse, and then sleep on it. Practice, rehearse, and then sleep on it, because our brains, as you know, connect the dots when we sleep. So so don't cram your prep in a day or two before your interview, and get a good night's sleep. You will feel absolutely refreshed. You'll be in the zone. You'll be absolutely fine. Another thing that I've heard from other candidates is that they really recommend meditation or simple mindfulness, vipassana type practice. Anything that you can get from an app like Headspace, for example, just start doing it 5-7 days before your interview. And again, I'm not trying to, like, I'm not laughing here. It's actually useful. It actually works in an interview context or outside of the interview context, because it puts you in the zone. It puts you in the present, in a state of presence. And the more in the zone, the less you have to engage your sort of, prefrontal cortex, the more confident you're going to be in an interview. And the last thing that I'm going to say to you is that even though a lot of folks want to work at Amazon, and Amazon obviously can take their pick of the candidates, but at the end of the day, you are interviewing Amazon as much as they're interviewing you. Gigi and I will attest that Amazon, in terms of their culture, is not for everyone. It's not a place for everyone. And I would say approach the interview not from a supplication standpoint, as in, could you please give me a job? I really want to work here. But from a partnership approach. Size them up as a potential partner, and enjoy an opportunity to talk exclusively about yourself for 10 hours thereabouts. So that would be my recommendation. Let's keep going. So we've got Anish. Welcome, Anish. So you've been selected for the Loop interview for a senior financial analyst position. Brilliant. And what should be the complexity for the LP stories? So our guidance is pick examples that demonstrate you dealing with problems of the highest complexity that you've dealt with. And that's pretty much the guidance. And the reason why we have to be as general is because, so complexity of examples, or rather than not the actual complexity of examples. Please don't make your examples complex. The stories themselves need to be simple and as comprehensible by folks who are not familiar with the subject matter as possible. The situations themselves and the problems that you are solving in your examples, these need to be as complex and as ambiguous as possible, because complexity and ambiguity of problems that you that you solve at work is a level signal at Amazon. It's also level signal anywhere else, but at Amazon, it's definitely a level signal. However, it is impossible to specifically tell you what is good for an L6, for an L7 in every role, because that level is fluid. And that's why you have a bar raiser in every external loop. And one of the jobs of the bar raiser, the same bar raiser as Gigi used to be at Amazon, is to make sure that what you've got in there in terms of the complexity, scope, impact is enough to conclusively beat the other 50% of Amazonians in the same level and role. So unfortunately, we have to sort of leave you here with a general guidance of maximize, pick the most complex problems that you have solved. Now let's keep going. What kind of questions stand out to the bar raiser? I don't really understand the question. What do you mean? What kind of questions stand out to the bar raiser? Feel free to clarify your question maybe at the end of the queue, and we'll get to you. So we're gonna get to Karim right now, and the question is: how important is SHL numerical assessments? Do they cancel the loop if you did bad? Do they assign all LPs for each interviewer in 4 times 45? So I'm going to start from 4 times 45. So no, they don't assign all LPs. It's usually 2 LPs per interview. So that 45 minutes, you're going to have 2 LPs that are going to test you on. So that physically they would be unable to assign all 16. Every role typically has 5 thereabouts. It again depends on the role, but if it's a non-technical role, it would have 5 critical LPs, and then a typical loop would have, so in your case, it's 4 interviews, so it's going to be 8 LPs. If it's an L6 loop, for example, it's going to have 5 interviews, so 10 LPs. And as I mentioned before, during the session, the best way to figure out which LPs are the most important for your role is to either ask your recruiter or study the job description in a lot of detail and see if you can tease them out. Do they cancel the loop if you did bad on an SHL assessment? So I'm gonna be very honest with you, and I'm gonna say that I actually do not know. But we've got Gigi right now. Hey, Gigi, how are you?
Hey, I'm okay. How are you?
I am doing well. I've actually managed to get myself into a pickle here because there's a question here that I don't think I can answer. So I hope that maybe you will help. So in this question, I managed to answer the back end of it, but the
Mm,
front end of it about the SHL assessment and whether they would cancel someone's loop if your SHL quartile is not good enough. To be honest, I don't have the slightest clue.
okay. So, in terms of the actual policy, that I cannot comment on, but I can say I have never in my entire career in Amazon interviewing had a loop cancelled because of an SHL underperformance. So, given how many loops and interviews I've done, statistically speaking, if a policy existed for that, I would have, I think, experienced it. So I'm going to go with it's probably very unlikely that that would happen to you just because of all of the level of organization that goes into pulling a loop together. By the time the results of the SHL come in, it's kind of too late, really, to cancel the whole thing.
And that makes a lot of sense to treat SHL as one of the inputs rather than a gateway.
Yes, beautifully put. Very poetic.
As we always do. So, Gigi, would you like to do a little tag team?
Yeah, sure. So, you know what? I'm just going to start with hello, everybody. I hope we're all well. It's kind of a bit of a head mess because usually there's no other person here, and so I can really focus on the unreal people in the internet world, as my granny would say. So I'm going to have to keep reminding myself that I'm not just here having a chat with Evgeny. So hello, everybody, and can we all just say a massive thank you to Yevgeny? Literally, I think it was about 2 hours ago, maybe, when I realized that the clocks had gone forward in the US, but have not gone forward here in the UK. And I had a one-to-one booked in my calendar and I could not be in two places at once. So I literally just pinged Yevgeny and said, help. And he jumped in and rescued me. So I'm very grateful for that. And it just solidifies why having a partner is such a great thing because there's someone to pick up my mess.
Feeling is mutual. There will be a time when I'll need you to step in.
You're gonna hold me to this one, aren't you? Cool. Yeah. So, Yevgeny, why don't we just keep going through the way you've been going through and picking questions, and then we can just play them between us.
Cool.
Take them in turns or whatever.
Let's do it. All right. So we're gonna put up Roger next, and so here we have a question. On average, do more candidates than not get hired after the loop interview, or does it vary fluidly across business units at Amazon?
Do you want to go for this one or will I?
I think it's better if you take this one and I'll take the next
Okay.
one.
Sure. So it's hugely variable, Roger. Broadly speaking, based on my experience and the research that I've done with both my colleagues when I was at Amazon and also with recruiters since I've left Amazon, is it somewhat ranges between 30 to 50% conversion rate at Loop, but it varies enormously, and it doesn't just vary at business unit level, it actually varies at role level. So some roles are much easier to hire because they're high volume roles, kind of junior entry level roles. So for example, brand managers, conversion rates on brand manager loops are pretty high based on my experience. They're a retail organization. Other roles in retail, such as economists, as an example, have a much lower conversion rate. I believe the causality / correlation is really around the level of specialism required for the role. So brand manager roles, not that specialist. Economists, very specialist. So broadly 30% to 50% as an average. That could easily go up to kind of 60-70% for the brand managers and down to kind of 10-15% for the economists as examples. So I'm sorry, no silver bullet answer there.
Thank you, Gigi. That was a great answer. And now we are moving to Benjamin. So Benjamin, here's a question about the very exciting time in your recruitment process, and that is negotiating of your compensation package. And he wants to know, how much room is there to negotiate TC if you receive an offer following the loop? The right answer to this question is it depends. It depends on how good of an offer they've actually made you. How far is the range penetration that they have assumed for your offer? I would say that our guidance is that there is typically room. I mean, there have been offers, and I'm not going to lie to you, from my experience, and Gigi, feel free to chime in, where Amazon went all out and effectively made an offer that they were unwilling to negotiate a single dime. And it usually ended to be a very, very strong offer. But I think from overwhelmingly, I would say 9 cases out of 10, there is room. I wouldn't be able to tell you the room in percentage terms, but from my experience and experience of my students, I would say 10 to 20%, I think there is typically room to negotiate. Gigi, does that gel with your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, the roles where really you'll have a hard time negotiating anything is kind of the graduate roles. They do generally have a pretty fixed start point, and that's broadly because everybody's the same. Like once you're a graduate, you've all broadly got the same experience, the same internships. Like it's really would be really hard to justify paying one graduate a certain amount of money and then another graduate that amount of money plus something. That variability and diversity obviously then changes the more experienced you get in your career. So grads, I always say give it a go, but I think I'm yet to hear a grad come back to me and said they got a positive outcome having done that. But then broadly everyone else, yes, there is in theory negotiation room, but exactly as you say, Evgeny, it depends where they land on the range in their first offer.
Okay, makes total sense. And I think, Gigi, this next one is entirely for you. The question is, what are the good questions to ask the bar raiser? Maybe the ones that you should have saved specifically for them.
Okay.
I can't remember saving any questions specifically for my bar raiser, but maybe that's not the right thing to do.
I would say there are no specific questions that you want to save for your bar raiser particularly, because your bar raiser is just another Amazonian. It's just another Amazonian that just happens to not be working in the team that you are interviewing for. The questions that you ask at the end of your interview are not meant to be used as data points to make a decision as to whether to hire you or not. And therefore, there's no logic in saving some particularly for the bar raiser because they're of no intrinsic value in the decision-making process. The only value your questions have are to you. And therefore, the question you have to be asking yourself is, given the person that I'm sat in front of and their role in the organization, or compared to the role that I am interviewing for, what are valuable questions to ask that individual? So unless you're particularly interested in becoming a bar raiser when you enter Amazon and you want to spend your last 5 minutes of your interview talking about that, which I'm not sure I think would be a great investment of time when you're trying to decide on the job and the hiring manager and Amazon as an organization, really, you need to be thinking about the fact that that bar raiser is not a person from your team or your hiring manager. And therefore, you should be thinking about asking them questions that would make sense to ask someone who isn't your hiring manager and isn't in your team. But I wonder whether, Roger, this comes from a heart of, can I ask them really intelligent questions, or what really intelligent questions should I ask them to impress them so the bar raiser is more likely to want to hire me? Goes back to my original point of those questions have no intrinsic value in the hiring decision. That's it.
Great answer, Gigi, as always. I think this next question is something that perhaps you and I both need to get our heads around, because I think this one is is a tricky one. Can you give an example of the type of questions or LPs that you have seen L7 candidates struggle with, or if so, any suggestions and recommendations? So I'm going to kick this off, and then maybe Gigi, you can come in and sort of share your experience. So I wouldn't say that struggle is the word that I would necessarily use here. I would say that for L7 candidates that come from traditional backgrounds, or backgrounds where organizational structures are not as flat as Amazon, or those that come from backgrounds where if you get to a, let's say, a director's role, which is typically, you would see directors from other companies outside of Amazon interviewing for an L7 senior manager roles, you oftentimes get surrounded by a lot more resource, from my experience, than you would be in an equivalent L7 role. However, when it comes to Amazon's bar, in terms of what you can and should demonstrate that you can do yourself, for example, in dive deep questions, for example, to inspect someone else's work without farming this out to someone else. This is where I have seen definitely candidates, at director level candidates from outside Amazon who are interviewing for L7, not necessarily struggle, but they just need to pick those examples where they the whole story is not just them farming out questions about their business and problem solving to someone else, whether it's internally or to agencies. And this is not to say that you can't delegate work, but I think Amazon has quite a high expectation that regardless of your seniority, you still will be very much into the details of the business. And that's something that is very unique to Amazon, not exclusive to Amazon, but Amazon is very keen to make sure that senior talent knows how to do that. The other area that I can think of is think big. So from what I have seen, think big questions definitely do land in loops for L7 roles. It's not to say that they don't land in more junior roles, but they almost always land in the L7 roles. And I remember an L8, a senior leader in the organization where I worked in, explicitly mentioned that for all of the L7 roles in his organization, think big is a critical LP and always will be. And that's pretty much because the types of behaviors that you would want to see under think big, it's very difficult to imagine someone in an L7 capacity not being sort of tasked to think about fundamental changes to business, imagining new directions, categories, products, and the whole feature. So in terms of picking examples, I think definitely for an L7, you need to dig really deep for examples when you've produced fundamental change to the business or the team or the organization that you operated with. So these are the two things that I could come to mind: being able still to demonstrate that you are in touch with the details despite your seniority and perhaps the resources that you have around you, and being able to demonstrate the type of fundamental and tectonic impact that you have produced on your organization to justify that L7 level. But Gigi, do you have a perspective? I'm sure you do.
I don't actually have anything to add beyond what you've said. That's exactly what I would have covered off as well. So no, perfect answer. Thank you.
All right. Well, in which case, we're going to pass the next one straight to you. So this question is from Roger. And the question is there more than one hiring manager? Interesting. The hiring manager he spoke to on the phone interview is not scheduled on his loop interview round. Very interesting.
Yeah, so it can happen for various reasons. So, for example, I'm going to go on brand manager again as an example. So there are some roles in Amazon that I'll call them cookie cutter, not meant to be derogatory, but they are scale roles that are very, very similar, whichever team you work on. And therefore what can happen, excuse me, I'm going to cough. Excuse me. What can happen is that any hiring manager could potentially make a decision on a candidate in that particular process and make the same decision that any other hiring manager would make. because the role itself is so replicatable and replicated across the org that any hiring manager could and should be able to make a good decision on that candidate. So that's quite often an experience of brand managers where they see multiple hiring managers through the process, and sometimes they don't even meet their own hiring manager at all before they're extended a job offer. There are other scenarios where the hiring manager might actually change in the middle of your process. So an example might be as simple as somebody leaves. That happens quite often. Someone is the original hiring manager and they move on either to another team inside Amazon, or they exit Amazon and a different hiring manager becomes responsible for that team, and therefore the process that you're going through. People go on vacation, sorry, this is the US. They go on parental leaves and things like that. So that's another reason why a different hiring manager might be involved. And something else that might happen, and you might just not see it because it's happening in the background, is your original job rec might have been filled, but they have another job rec that is pretty much exactly the same role, and they are just bringing that other hiring manager into the process to be able to consider you for that other job rec, and they just haven't bothered telling you about it because, quite frankly, it's just administrative back-end stuff and you don't really need to know about it. But what I would say, Roger, is try and find out who your hiring manager actually is going to be. Who is the person that you will be working with day in, day out, week in, week out? Because the decision that people that we work for have an enormous impact on our lives. They will influence your experience in the organization, in any organization, exponentially. So when you make a decision to go and work for a company, you're also making a decision to hook your cart to your hiring manager as the horse, if you'll pardon the analogy. So make sure you find out who your hiring manager is. And if you're not going to see them in interview, I strongly suggest, if you get an offer, to do a reverse interview post offer, meet your hiring manager and take the opportunity to try to ask them questions and get comfortable that they're the type of person that you actually want to work with long term. That's it. That's my advice for Roger.
Amazing advice, Gigi, as always. So I'm gonna take this next one now, and so this question comes from Ashish, who is finding it difficult to identify multiple LP stories, and so he's looking for guidance on how he can start working on that for the loop. And I think this guidance would be from us, not just to Ashish, but to anyone who is struggling with sort of getting that sort of inspiration, getting from a blank sheet of paper of, I've got absolutely nothing to, oh, actually I did do something like this, and that is get inspired by the leadership principles themselves, by the complicated facets that run behind them. So the first step that I would say is get the free course that we've got on customer obsession. And if you go to our website, you will find that free course on the Amazon Interview Whiz page. And if you leave us a comment underneath this video, we will post you in our response the direct link to that course as well, and that will get you going on customer obsession and see if this type of content will get your creative juices flowing. If your memory starts fishing out those professional experiences from your past career, and you're thinking, actually I do have something similar that I've done in such and such role in such and such in such and such year, then you can use the rest of our preparation, i.e. the Amazon Interview Whiz course, to get you into that Amazon mood, so that you will be able to identify situations not just for customer obsession, but for the rest of your leadership principles. I think that is the only way that I would recommend going about it. I will say that I have encountered some candidates who tried to do it the other way around. For example, they've got an idea of some accomplishments and professional situations that they either feel good about or maybe even proud about, and then they wanted to retrofit them into leadership principles. So my advice is don't do that. Actually, first understand what Amazon is looking for in detail, and then just see what's going to happen. I guarantee you, you after you've watched the content, you won't just be sitting and still staring at a blank sheet of paper. I don't know, Gigi, if you have anything to add.
No, I don't think so. And actually, the one question I had actually was over Ashish's question, which I think you can interpret another way as well. So I'm going to try and answer this question in the other interpretation, then whichever interpretation is the right one will have given Ashish's example. So the other interpretation of Ashish's question is difficulty in identifying multiple LP stories, as in LP stories that have multiple LPs in them. So if that's the interpretation, if you have a really good story, it's inevitable that it will have multiple leadership principles in it. But I strongly advise my candidates not to try and tell their story and intentionally aim to cover multiple leadership principles. Because if you do that, you will not actually answer the question. The question that you're asked in an Amazon interview is asked with the focus on one particular LP. So what you need to do is answer the question. I know it's crazy, but actually answer the question. That will lead you towards the key leadership principle that they're looking for information on. And if it is a big enough, interesting enough, complex enough story, you will inevitably show behaviors of other leadership principles that your interviewer will capture and will share at debrief or capture in their notes if it's in the early rounds. But don't try and tell stories with multiple leadership principles in them. Tell the story focused on one leadership principle. They will do the rest to pick out the other elements. So hopefully that covers off both interpretations.
Very comprehensive, very comprehensive. All right. Gigi, why don't you pick the next question?
Which one do I like? Okay. Does this work where we both? Yeah, it does actually. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. So Benjamin, I'm going to do this one for you. And only because I don't actually have an answer, unhelpfully. But I want you to, I want you to understand why I don't have an answer, or at least why my answer is vague. So the question is, can you give some examples of what make you inclined or uninclined to move forward with a candidate? So at the highest level, the difference between being inclined and not inclined is around scope and complexity, right? That's kind of the biggest one that is the determiner as to whether someone is going to move you forward or not. And Evgeny and I struggle with this answer for candidates all the time who want to know what exactly is the right scope and complexity answer for an L5, an L6, an L7. And unfortunately, we don't have that answer. Nobody has that answer because the goalpost is always moving, and the what is a bar raising from scope and complexity point of view at any level is effectively a function of the personal experiences of the individuals who are on your particular loop in terms of their daily interactions with people below, at, or above the level at which you're interviewing for. Therefore, it's a bit of a existential exercise, and therefore no one, not Evgeny, not myself, not any other coach or recruiter can tell you definitively what is going to be a bar raising example. But the difference between the people that we are inclined for and we are not inclined for is primarily the ones that show complexity in their examples. They can deal with different things going on at the same time. They can deal with barriers that they hit and that they have to make their way through. They can deal with different types of problems in the same contextual situation. And then scope, which is different from complexity. Scope reflects the range of activities that you show examples of in any given role. So in all of our roles, we all have kind of sub activities, sub skill sets that go into the day-to-day operations of your role. So again, a person who is always giving one examples, let's talk about as if they were a finance person. If the examples that you keep using over and over and over is the end of month reporting, and you never bring up an example that's anything other than end of month reporting, then your interviewers are going to be a little bit concerned that from a scope perspective, you don't have all of the skills associated with doing the role, because the role is going to be more than end of month reporting. So you need to come up with a variety of examples of the different types of functions that you have executed in your role in order to convince them that you have the appropriate scope. So people who show good scope and complexity relative to their level and their role are the people that tend to get inclined. The second one, which is almost as important, is the people that actually talk about how they do things rather than what they do. So we have, I've got to keep talking about it we now because it's our YouTube channel. We have a really good example on a video on the YouTube channel that talks about the difference between how evidence and what evidence. But the reason why the people who use how evidence we are more inclined towards is because it's only through talking about how you do things that you're able to demonstrate your behavior. What you did is not how you behaved, it's simply outputs. Oh, that's a good way. Yevgeny's going to love this. He loves talking inputs and outputs. I've never thought about it this way before. What you do is an output. How you do it is an input. And behaviors are inputs. So again, we're more inclined towards people who can articulate how they do things, inputs. That's it. That's my guidance on that one.
And I think we're just got to the top of the hour.
Awesome. Okay, so shall we tell everybody where they can get our amazing taster course, Evgeny? I think we have a little banner there that we can put up that has the link that everyone can use.
Yes, I think this is, let's have a look. Is it this banner?
It is that banner.
Indeed.
Yes. All right, and this is the bit that I get wrong every time. I never work out which way it starts. This is like number 73 of these.
Well, at least you can do that. I'm way too zoomed in, so I'm not gonna even try.
And it's on the wrong side for me. Right, everybody, look. There is the link to go and get. Yay, that's it, man. Go and get our taster course. As Evgeny absolutely says, we've created our own structure and learning model for how you understand the leadership principles. And it's based on having just dealt with it so much for so long. We're able to see inside it in the way I think most other people can't. So the Customer Obsession Masterclass taster course deconstructs customer obsession for you. There are 4 different facets to customer obsession that you could possibly be asked questions on. It breaks them all down to you, makes it super, super clear. It tells you pretty much what the interviewer is looking for in your customer obsession answer. It's literally a blueprint. And then there are some mock interviews of me interviewing me, so you can see how that all comes together in an interview. So please do get it. It's really good quality content. We're not giving you stuff that's only half information to hook you in so that you get the rest. That stands on its own 2 feet. Watch that and you will nail every single customer obsession question that you're asked at the interview. Obviously, we give it away because we want you to love our content and buy some more. But nonetheless, it stands on its own 2 feet. And I promise you, you will love it. Okay, so I think we're done for the US. And we're going to have to get back online. I'm going to have to jump onto the other one because we've got to deal with Europe now.
Yes, you do.
So I'm going to go deal with Europe. Yevgeny's going to go and do, I don't know, family stuff, I guess. So thank you for joining, everybody. Thank you so much, Evgeny. I so appreciate you digging me out. It won't happen again.
My pleasure, and it's great to be here, and it's great to have everyone online. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you when we see you.
See you when we see you, everybody. Take care. Bye. Be
Bye
safe.
bye.